For decades, the Keller mansion kept a secret that unsettled an entire town. Though neighbors often heard the laughter of children echoing from its shuttered windows, no one had ever seen a Keller child outside. Not at school, not in the gardens, not even in town. Were they hidden for protection, or imprisoned for reasons far darker than anyone imagined? On the outskirts of a quiet town, half hidden behind overgrown hedges and towering iron gates, stands the Keller mansion, a vast estate swallowed in ivy and shadow. Its high, arched windows are perpetually shuttered, giving the house a lifeless, watchful appearance, as if it has been holding its breath for over a century. Few people walk near its gates, and those who do often quicken their pace. Locals claim that if you glance toward those shuttered windows, you might see the curtains shift ever so slightly, as though someone, or something, is peeking out. Yet no figure is ever clearly visible. Children growing up in the town were warned never to stare too long, told that the house notices when you look back. At night, when the streets fall silent and even the wind seems to avoid that part of town, faint sounds drift from the mansion's upper floors. Soft lullabies in an old language, the patter of small feet across wooden floors, and, sometimes, bursts of children's laughter. But no one has seen a Keller child outdoors. Not once. In the late 1800s, the Kellers were among the wealthiest families in the region, their fortune built on textiles and trade. Yet unlike other prominent families of the time, they avoided public life almost entirely. They rarely appeared in town, never attended church services, and hosted no grand parties despite owning one of the largest estates for miles. Their secrecy quickly became their defining feature. Servants were seldom seen, deliveries were left at the gate, and correspondence was limited to terse, formal notes. Neighbors who caught glimpses of the family described them as polite but distant, faces pale, smiles thin, eyes that flicked nervously toward their own house as if afraid to stay away too long. It was their children, however, who stirred the most suspicion. While other wealthy families paraded their heirs at community events, not a single Keller child was ever seen beyond those locked gates. Births were whispered about rather than celebrated. Town gatherings passed without a single Keller presence, and as years went by, people began to ask the same unnerving question. Were there really children inside that house at all? In 1887, during a routine census, a government clerk arrived at the Keller mansion to update household records. The patriarch, Heinrich Keller, answered every question with curt precision, listing himself, his wife, and 5 children by name and age. Yet when the clerk requested to see them, as was required for verification, Heinrich firmly refused, citing illness and delicate constitutions that supposedly kept the children indoors. Neighbors, however, had long been uneasy. The sprawling front yard held evidence of children, a rusted swing swaying gently in the breeze, a small ball half buried in the grass, and a set of dolls lined neatly on the porch rail. Yet none of those toys ever seemed to move or age. Dust gathered, paint peeled, but no little hands came to claim them. One of the mansion's maids, who stayed less than a month, later confessed to villagers that she left because of the sounds. At night, when she passed the upstairs corridor, she heard footsteps, quick, light ones, far more than 5. It wasn't just children running, she whispered. It sounded like too many. And they didn't stop when I called out. Over time, official records began to reveal a disturbing trend. Every Keller child listed in town documents was noted to have died before reaching adolescence. The stated causes varied: illness, accidents, sudden fever, but they all shared one detail. There were no witnesses outside the mansion. Notices would appear in the local paper, but no child had ever been seen alive to begin with, and now their deaths were just as invisible. Funerals, when held, were private affairs. The heavy iron gates remained locked, and no one in town was invited inside. A black-draped carriage would leave the estate at dawn, carrying a coffin that looked too small and too light. The cemetery records show burial plots marked with the Keller name, but villagers quietly admitted they never saw a coffin lowered into the ground. Even more unsettling were the sounds that followed. Nights after each supposed death, townsfolk walking past the mansion swore they still heard children's laughter floating through the upper windows. Some said they counted more voices than there should have been. Others avoided the road altogether, convinced that whatever was in the Keller house hadn't died at all. As the decades passed and unsettling reports continued, the town surrounding the Keller estate began shaping its own explanations, each one darker than the last. Some believed the family's reclusive behavior masked a shameful secret, that the Keller children were born with severe deformities or conditions so unusual that their parents refused to let anyone see them. In an era obsessed with appearances, it wasn't unthinkable that a wealthy family would go to extreme lengths to hide such things. Others whispered about something far more sinister. There were rumors of strange deliveries arriving at night, crates marked with medical symbols, strange instruments glimpsed in wagon beds, and the faint smell of chemicals drifting from the mansion's chimneys. These whispers gave rise to theories that the Kellers were conducting experiments on their own children or attempting to cure a hereditary illness through methods best left unspoken. But the most chilling legend was the one no one wanted to believe yet everyone repeated, that the Kellers had made a bargain. According to this story, their wealth wasn't just the result of trade but of an unholy pact. In exchange for their fortune, they were required to give up their children, generation after generation, to something that lived within the house itself. Former servants who dared to speak about their time in the Keller mansion all mentioned the same forbidden part of the house, the East Wing. It had been sealed for decades, its double doors bolted, its key kept by the patriarch alone. Dust piled so thick outside its threshold that it suggested no one had crossed it in years. Yet those same servants swore the wing was not empty. The windows along that side of the mansion were unlike the others. While the rest of the house had tall, open panes hidden by heavy drapes, the East Wing's windows were blocked by thick iron bars from the inside. Behind them, no curtains moved, and no light ever shone, even when the rest of the house glowed with candlelight. At night, those who worked in the mansion heard things they tried not to discuss. Scratching sounds, soft at first, then frantic, seemed to come from behind the locked doors. Sometimes it was a steady scraping, like fingernails dragging against wood. Other times, it was quicker, lighter, like the skittering of small hands or feet. Servants who stayed long enough began sleeping with pillows over their ears, swearing that if you listened too closely, the sounds would start to mimic the rhythm of your own heartbeat. In 1912, the Keller mansion's long-kept secrets nearly burned with it. A fire broke out late one autumn night, quickly consuming the western halls and racing toward the upper floors. Neighbors rushed to help, and firefighters from 2 towns arrived to battle the blaze. As they forced their way inside, several reported hearing what they described as unmistakable cries, high-pitched, panicked voices coming from the locked East Wing. The doors there were sealed tight, reinforced with heavy iron bolts that no axe could break in time. Smoke poured from the gaps, and behind it came pounding fists, small ones, thudding against the walls. When the fire was finally contained, much of the mansion was left in ruin, but the East Wing remained eerily intact, its barred windows blackened from within. Inside, no bodies were ever found. Official records afterward listed only Heinrich Keller and his wife as survivors. No mention was made of any children, not in newspapers, not in government documents. It was as if they had never existed at all. After the fire, the Keller mansion was left to decay. Its once grand halls are now brittle with rot, ceilings sagging under the weight of time. Ivy has consumed most of the exterior, yet the barred windows of the East Wing remain strangely untouched, their glass intact despite decades of storms. Urban explorers who've entered the ruins report an atmosphere heavier than silence, a feeling that the house notices them. Many claim to hear the rapid patter of small feet running across the upper floors, even when no one else is there. The sounds come suddenly, then stop all at once, as though whatever made them is aware it's being followed. In the dust-covered nurseries, toys remain arranged with eerie care. Dolls lined up shoulder to shoulder on shelves, wooden blocks stacked into perfect towers that collapse if anyone tries to touch them. Some visitors have sworn that the dolls' positions change between trips, as if they're being played with when no one is watching. The most unsettling reports come from those who linger too close to the windows. They say small handprints, smaller than any adult could make, slowly appear on the inside of the glass. Not faded, not old, but fresh.